Here's the thing about leadership self-doubt. It's both incredibly common and incredibly unhelpful. A study from the International Journal of Leadership found that 75% of executives regularly experience significant self-doubt, despite outward appearances of confidence. We're walking around looking sure of ourselves, while our inner critics are having an absolute field day. Today, I am sharing a two-pronged approach that's been a game changer for me, and then I incorporate it into my coaching. It's a powerful combination of two things: positive intelligence techniques that quiet your inner saboteurs, and CliftonStrengths to amplify what you're naturally really good at already. So let's start with fascinating insight from leadership psychology. Self-doubt, it's not actually evidence of incompetence. It's often a sign of conscientiousness and high standards gone rogue. Research from organizational psychologist Tara Urich shows that the most self-aware leaders actually question themselves regularly. The problem isn't with this questioning. It's that we get stuck there. I know I spent my first 2 years as a manager in a constant state of thinking, I'm not really qualified for this, am I? Despite consistently good results. I was always really anxious before every performance appraisal. Does this sound familiar? My breakthrough came when I realized something counterintuitive. My self-doubt stemmed from my strengths being misdirected, not from actual incompetence. And this is where this two-part approach comes in. We identify specific patterns causing your doubt and now redirect your natural strengths towards positive leadership impacts. Let's tackle those persistent inner critics using positive intelligence, a framework developed by Shirzad Shaman based on extensive research in neuroscience, positive psychology, and performance science. The core insight of positive intelligence is that our minds work against us through specific patterns called saboteurs. These are the mental voices that protect us, but now they actually limit our potential. Shaman's research at Stanford identified 9 common saboteurs, with the judge being the master saboteur that fuels all the others. Basically, the judge, he's the ringleader. You know, that voice that constantly points out your flaws, compares you unfavorably to others, and makes major mountains out of tiny little molehills. That's your judge working overtime. For many leaders, the primary saboteur might be the controller. The belief that unless you personally manage every little detail, disaster will soon follow. Despite evidence that teams perform better with appropriate autonomy, the saboteur convinces you that stepping back means you're irresponsible. The research shows these saboteurs literally hijack different brain regions, reducing access to our executive function and creative thinking. Exactly what leaders need most. So how do we quiet our saboteurs? Here's how to apply positive intelligence practically. Step 1. Identify your dominant saboteurs using the free assessment you can find at positiveintelligence.com, which I'll leave in the notes. Understanding the specific pattern is half the battle. Second, label them when they appear. Research from UCLA's neuroscience department shows that simply naming a negative thought pattern, that's my judge talking, reduces its emotional impact by 43%. This creates immediate mental distance. Step 3. Shift to what Shamin calls sage perspective, through brief mindfulness techniques. The most practical approach is a 10-second sage reset. Focus completely on one physical sensation, like your breath, or the feeling of your feet on the floor, or my favorite, petting my cat. Do this for 10 seconds. This activates your prefrontal cortex, breaking the saboteur pattern. Warning: if you use the petting your cat, sometimes they overstimulate in 10 seconds and they could bite you. When you catch yourself thinking, I should already know this, before speaking up in a meeting, try saying to yourself, that's my judge trying to protect me from looking foolish. Then use the 10-second reset before redirecting your thoughts to, I don't need to know everything, I just need to take the next step. Now, for the second powerful approach, identifying amplifying your natural strengths through CliftonStrengths. Developed by Gallup After studying over 2 million professionals across various fields, CliftonStrengths assessments identify your natural patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving across 34 talent themes. The fundamental insight? We perform best when we lean into our strengths, rather than fixating on our weaknesses. The research behind this is really compelling. Teams that focus on strengths are 12.5% more productive and 8.9% more profitable. Even more relevant to our topic today, leaders who use strength-based development report 14.9% lower turnover and 29% higher profit. So here's how you apply this approach. Step 1, you have to take the CliftonStrengths assessment. This one isn't free, but the top 5 alone is affordable. Though I do recommend, if you can afford it, the full 34. Step 2, identify your top strengths and how your leadership can address these challenges. For example, for me, individualization is a top strength. So this means that you can trust your innate ability to recognize unique qualities, motivations, and potential in each team member. Then you would create what Gallup researchers call strength-based solutions for specific leadership challenges. When facing a situation that triggers doubt, you can now ask, how can I use my natural talents to approach this? With individualization as a strength, you can approach different team conversations by focusing on your natural ability to understand what makes each person tick. This is something that I try to focus on now that I know this is one of my top strengths. I now try to focus on, instead of worrying about having a one-size-fits-all approach, I lean into this talent of customizing my communication to each individual's needs and motivations. So the magic happens when you combine these two methods, positive intelligence and CliftonStrengths. Here's how you do it. When your self-doubt appears, you now need to identify this and figure out which saboteur is the most active. Next, you use the 10-second sage reset to break this pattern. Then finally, you consciously direct your attention to how your top strengths can address this situation. Here's a practical example. When leading a team through change, the hyperachiever saboteur might create constant self-doubt about how you're not doing enough. Through positive intelligence practices, you can learn to recognize this pattern. If your top strength is individualization, you can redirect your attention from, am I achieving enough? To, how can I use individualizations as a strength to understand how each team member's unique concerns about this change. This moves you from self-doubt to constructive action that actually helps your team. This approach, it works for any strength, not just why. If your top theme, for instance, is strategic, you might redirect from self-doubt to, how can I use my strategic thinking to map the clearest path forward? If harmony is a top strength, you might focus on, how can I use my harmony strength to bring different perspectives together? So how do you implement this plan? Well, here's a 3-step plan to start applying these approaches. Step 1, take both the assessments, the positive intelligence and the CliftonStrengths. Step 2, you need to practice your daily saboteur interruption. This is called PQ reps in the positive intelligence book. Set a reminder 3 times daily. When it sounds, identify any saboteur thoughts that are holding you back. If you are being held back by them, practice a 10-second reset. Pet the cat. Smell your coffee. Just breathe a little and take in the silence. Research shows this brief practice creates measurable brain changes in just 6 weeks. Finally, create a strengths-based leadership approach. For each key leadership responsibility, identify which of your top strengths can help you the most. When doubt appears, constantly shift to strength-based thinking. And finally, document how your strength-based approach impacts your results. Remember, self-doubt, it isn't evidence that you're a bad leader. It's just your saboteurs temporarily drowning out your natural talents. With practice, you can quiet those voices and amplify your strengths instead. So what saboteur impacts your leadership the most? Share in the comments, and let's continue this conversation about transforming self-doubt into authentic leadership confidence. Because, let's be honest, we're all just figuring this leadership thing out as we go. The difference is whether we do it while beating ourselves up, or instead, we leverage our unique strengths that got us here in the first place.